Hello, it's Alex, the Bookubus. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the books I read in March, and I have 8 books to talk about. Most of them were pretty short ones, which is probably why I was able to read so much. But yeah, mostly had a good time. There were a couple of books that I read that maybe didn't quite live up to my expectations, but anyway, we'll get to that in a moment. And yeah, filming wise, I am staying behind the camera today. I really wanted to film today, but I just wasn't really in the mood to get in front of the camera, so here we are. But anyway, let's get on to the books. First up, I read Gone to See the Riverman by Kristopher Triana, and this just came out I think last year or maybe the year before. I bought it on Kindle I think towards the end of last year, and yeah, just got around to reading it. This is about a character called Laurie. She has been writing to a serial killer who is in jail, and she's been writing to him for some time. She feels she has a relationship of sorts with him, and yeah, her day-to-day life isn't particularly great or fulfilling for her, and so yeah, she kind of connects a lot with true crime and serial killers and stuff. That's her thing. And this particular serial killer, Edmund, she has been writing back and forth with for some time, and he has asked her to do something for him, which involves going to see the Riverman, whoever that is. And so in order to prove how much, he means to her, etc., she decides to go ahead with this. But one issue is that her sister has some handicaps and isn't really she's not able to leave her by herself. So she takes her with her. So the journey from A to B is, even more of a struggle than it would have been if she'd gone by herself. And yeah, as the story goes on, so we're following her on this physical journey to perform this task for Edmund. And meanwhile, we get backstory of Laurie and her sister and what happened to her and her family in general. There's a bunch of stuff that happens there in Laurie's past that we find out about as the story goes on, and some of it's super dark, super messed up. And yeah, I thought this one was excellent. I really did. Really well written, really engrossing, and yeah, just the kind of story that it had that feeling in the pit of your stomach that you just feel like, oh, where is this gonna go? Like, what awful thing is gonna happen next? It was very good. I will say, and without going into specifics and giving spoilers, there was something about it that didn't quite work for me, which was a shame, but I did still think it was excellent. I would definitely read more by this author, and I rated this one 4 stars. Then I read a novel, Throat Sprockets by Tim Lucas. This came out, I believe, in the 90s, and I borrowed a copy of this from my library. This is about a male character who becomes obsessed with this short film that he sees at this porno theatre. He works in advertising. He has a pretty good job, is well paid. He lives with his girlfriend, and he, on his lunch breaks at work, he visits this local little porn cinema, and one day when he's there, he sees part of this film called Throat Sprockets, which is generally focused on the throat, specifically throats of women. And because he didn't see the whole thing, he is kind of obsessed by what he has seen and wants to see the whole thing. And so that becomes an obsession of his to try and track it down, and it just kind of goes from there. So essentially it is a story about obsession, about this particular film, and yeah, who made it, what does it all mean, etc. And also how it affects this character and his relationship with his girlfriend, his relationship at work, and how it affects his actual work in his job. So yeah, it's an interesting one. This one wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be. I think the premise of it, you know, a horror story about somebody becoming obsessed with a weird film, like that sounds totally my cup of tea. But this one just, I don't know, it just didn't quite do it for me. I think the style of writing, I mean, it was fine, it was well written, but it just felt very kind of cold. I never really, you know, cared about the character, and maybe I wasn't supposed to, but I definitely didn't really get invested in him or the story at any point. It definitely had its moments that I thought were great and that I thought were interesting, but as a whole, yeah, it just, I thought it was going to be like a lot darker and grittier maybe, so maybe I just had the completely wrong end of the stick. Like where my mind goes to from hearing that premise is not really what the book is. So I think I was maybe just a bit disappointed, but like I say, I did still enjoy it somewhat. It's just, yeah, it was like a 3.5 star read for me. So if it sounds interesting to you, then totally check it out. But I, yeah, don't think it's going to be on my like favourites list by the end of the year, unfortunately. Okay, then I read a point horror book. This was Mother's Helper by A. Bates. And yeah, this was a good one. This is about a teenage girl called Becky who takes a job as a mother's helper, essentially like a nanny. And it's basically the mother and young son, but the thing that's a bit different about this particular job is that they are living on a remote island, and so yeah, Becky has to go there for the summer and stay with them. It's very remote and isolated. There's not really much for her to do there, so she gets bored pretty quickly. It's not exactly the summer she thought it might be. But she does meet this boy, a teenage boy in the area, and you know, he's cute but kind of seems a bit suspicious, and yeah, there's some strange things that are going on just in general with the whole situation and the place that they're staying. And of course, yeah, as the story goes on, we find out a bit more about exactly what's going on, and yeah, the circumstances surrounding why they're having to live in this isolated area. Yeah, this was a good one. I thought it was a solid point horror. It was, yeah, it had some good like mystery, suspense, and I liked the characters, and yeah, I thought the direction the story took, again, yeah, I'm not going to spoil it, but I thought it was pretty interesting and unexpected and kind of dark. I thought this one was a really good, solid point horror read, and I rated it 3.5 stars. Next, I read Japanese Tales of Mystery and Imagination by Edogawa Rampo. This is a short story collection that I borrowed from my library, and yeah, this was excellent. Definitely recommend this one. So this author, I believe, was Japan's kind of first mystery writer, and this collection came out, I believe, in 1956. So the stories, I think he started his writing career maybe in the 20s, and yeah, so this is a selection of his short stories And if you think the name Edogawa Rampo sounds a little bit like Edgar Allan Poe, you would be right, because he, you know, took some inspiration from Poe, and to the point that he decided to make his pen name the kind of the Japanese translation of Edgar Allan Poe, which I thought was really, really cool. While the author is, I think, known for his mysteries, and definitely, yeah, there's mystery elements to some of these stories, I think a lot of them are definitely a lot weirder and more kind of horror based than like this title of Mystery and Imagination would maybe lead me to believe. So, I mean, I was definitely happy about that, because obviously I love that stuff. There was one about a guy who became obsessed with like lenses, you know, like things that could refract and reflect stuff, and it was just pretty bonkers. It was great. I'm just looking at the description on Goodreads here actually, and it describes it as bizarre and blood-curdling expeditions into the fantastic, the perverse and the strange. I think that's definitely a great summation of what this book is. There are definitely a couple that were a bit more your classic mystery, crime type of stories, but then there were others that were, yeah, just very dark. Some, you know, were a bit disturbing. Some were very weird and strange. I just really, really enjoyed this collection. I thought it was great. So yeah, if that sounds interesting to you, I would highly recommend it. I rated this one 4 stars. Yeah, I really did think it was excellent. Then I read Experimental Film by Gemma Files, and this is one I borrowed on ebook through Hoopla, which is, if you haven't heard of Hoopla, it's like you get it through your library. I think it's just a US thing, but if you look it up online, you'll see if your library connects with it and if you have access to it or not. But yeah, they have ebooks and movies, and yeah, it's pretty great. So Experimental Film is a book I've been meaning to check out for some years, and this is the one that I think was the most disappointing to me, unfortunately. It was still good. There was definitely a lot I really liked about it, but I did think it was a little bit all over the place. So yeah, hence the 3-star rating. So this is about a character called Lois. It's set in Canada. I believe the author is Canadian, and she and her partner have a son who is autistic, and she has worked in film. She was like a film critic and film reviewer, and now she teaches film. And anyway, that has kind of now fallen by the wayside, and she's like looking for another project, and she ends up stumbling upon this experimental film that she believes was created by this woman who, if it was created by her, would mean that this woman was like the first female Canadian filmmaker. So a pretty big deal if that were to be the case. And the film itself is very strange, and the more Lois looks into it, the more she finds out, and she finds out that it seems to be linked to this kind of folk tale, and yeah, there's a lot of layers going on in the story. And I don't know, maybe too many layers. Maybe that was something that there just seemed to be a lot going on, and I feel like it got a bit too much at times. Sometimes the way that the storytelling worked, it was just kind of hard to get into. And yeah, again, the main character isn't particularly super likable, but yeah, I don't think she was meant to be. But it, you know, at times it kind of, yeah, it made it hard to really care or, you know, get invested in her story. Especially at the beginning, I think when I first started reading it, I was like, ooh, I don't know if this is something I want to continue reading, because she has quite a condescending voice. She's talking about film, and just, yeah, the way that it comes across, it kind of has that know-it-all vibe, and it just made me think, well, like, why do you think I would pick up a book called experimental film if I didn't have like an interest in that? Like, so don't treat me like I have no clue what I might be reading here. It just kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, maybe. It did pick up once the story kind of got going, but yeah, I think the start of it, I was like, I wasn't quite sure if this was what I had expected. Anyway, so it becomes a story of, yeah, like investigative, yeah, some kind of creepy-ish things happen and some strange things go on. There's kind of some dangerous things that start playing out, you know, the more she's looking into it. And she also has some health issues that are kind of affecting everything, and it's like, should she really be, you know, putting her time and energy into this? Yeah, I think another thing that let this one down for me a bit is just some of the things that played out. It was kind of like, oh, that's very convenient that happened that way, isn't it? And like, that happened a few times. So yeah, I don't know, I wouldn't like not recommend this. I mean, I gave it 3 stars, so I did still think it was good. Like, I think it was, again, like Throat Sprockets, it was one that there were things I liked about it and things I didn't like about it, so it was kind of an inconsistent read. But yeah, generally I would rate it 3 stars. Yeah, I think this one's just disappointing for me because I thought I was going to really, really love it, and I didn't, so that's a shame. But yeah, I'd be curious to hear other people's thoughts on this one if they've read it. Next up, I read Marabou, Stork, Nightmares by Irvine Welsh, and this was a reread for me. I read this probably back in my 20s and remember loving it. I would have classed it as like my favourite Irvine Welsh. I've read a few of his books, and yeah, I think he's a great author. I've really enjoyed a lot of his work, and yeah, this was just one that I really wanted to revisit. So, and I'm really glad I did. I gave this one 5 stars. It was definitely my favourite of the month. And yeah, even though I remembered loving it and it being really like messed up, there was a lot of details that I could not remember because it has been some years. But yeah, this is about a character called Roy, and he is in a coma, and the story's told in a really interesting way. So he is, like, part of it is him in this coma, and he is kind of in this like hallucinatory dream coma situation, and he is, yeah, his goal is to kill all of the Marabou storks in Africa. So that's one part of the story. And then there are also parts where he is able to hear what's going on around him in the hospital where he's in a coma in. And so he can hear like family who have come to visit him, but he's not, you know, conscious enough for them to know that he is awake and able to hear them, but he can hear them. And so there were those moments as well throughout the story. And then we also go through a lot of Roy's memories of his childhood and his upbringing, and yeah, just different phases of his life that have brought him to where he is today. And yeah, I just think it's told really, really well, the kind of the back and forth, and yeah, it's quite a trip and really, really well done. It's really dark, it's pretty, yeah, messed up in places, probably, yeah, quite a lot of trigger warnings. It also, in amongst all of this, yeah, really messed up stuff, it manages to be humorous at times as well. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say about this one, but I really thought it was brilliant. I'm really glad I reread it, because it's one that I've been kind of meaning to pick up for ages, and I'm not very good with rereading books. I always tend to favour, you know, something that's new to me over something that I've already read. But really glad I read this one because it was brilliant. But yeah, definitely a dark and messed up one. And yeah, it's surprising actually that I rarely hear anyone talk about this. In fact, I never hear anyone talk about this now that I've said that. I mean, Irvine Welsh's most famous one is Train Spotting, and yeah, that one's great. And there's a couple of others of his that I sometimes hear talked about, but this one, I don't know, I know it's an older book, but it's just not one I hear talked about much. But I think it would definitely class as, you know, horror adjacent. It's definitely disturbing. So yeah, if you're looking for something like that, I highly recommend it. And then also, yeah, the way that the story's told is really unique and interesting. So it just has a lot going for it. I think he's a great writer. And this one was 5 stars. Yay. Then I read The Blue Mirror by Kathe Koja. This is a young adult book of hers, but yeah, it definitely feels horror tinged. It's about a teenage girl called Maggie. She's, yeah, kind of a loner at school, and she hangs out at this coffee shop called The Blue Mirror. She draws in a sketchbook a lot. That's kind of her escape. And the world that she creates in her art, she also calls the Blue Mirror. And one day she meets this guy who is very handsome and intriguing, and he is homeless, and he has a couple of other homeless people kind of in tow, and they end up kind of latching on to Maggie. And he definitely treats Maggie like he wants to, you know, be with her and that he loves her. But yeah, is that really the case? And as the story goes on, yeah, we kind of learn that maybe this relationship isn't as great as it might seem, as Maggie wanted it to be, and it's actually it's toxic, and this guy is not a good guy. Yeah, I thought this was an interesting one. I didn't really know what to expect because I hadn't really heard anything about it, but it's Kathe Koja, so I really wanted to read it. And I just thought it was wonderful. I mean, her writing is just fantastic. It really is. She could write about anything. I'm sure I would love it. And yeah, the character of Maggie was really well written. She was relatable in some ways, and yeah, her home life isn't great. She just lives with just her mother, and she has a drinking problem and just kind of isn't really always there for Maggie. So, you know, Maggie feels like she's kind of really alone. You know, she's kind of, everything falls on her to deal with, and she just wants her escape from her reality, and when she thinks she finds it in this cute guy, it's pretty devastating to then find out that that's not the case. I also think the element of these kids living on the streets was really interesting, and yeah, there are some other characters that play a big part in the story, that I thought it was really well done. So yeah, I rated this one 4 stars. I thought it was great. And then last up, I read Blood Red Roses by Sarah Armstrong. And this is part of the Twilight series, which came out in the 80s. This one was really good too. Yeah, this is about a teenage girl called Kate, and she and her family have just recently moved to a new place and are settling in, and she's, you know, getting used to a new school and everything. And she one day visits this antique store and finds this really interesting mirror. So she buys it, but yeah, there's something strange about the mirror, and she starts having these really awful nightmares, and she also just starts acting like not like herself. She'll be really kind of aggressive and quick to anger, and that's just not like her at all. And anyway, I don't want to go into too much detail because it would kind of spoil where the story goes, but yeah, I guess we'll just say that there might be some kind of possession going on, which you could probably guess, and also witchy related stuff. Yeah, I thought this one was really good. I thought it had some good like mystery and suspense elements, and it towards the end, when we get like a bit more backstory, yeah, that was pretty dark and kind of gruesome actually. So that was really interesting for, you know, the target audience for that kind of content. It's always kind of interesting to see how far they go and what they can get away with. But yeah, this one was a good one. I gave this one 4 stars as well. I mean, I know rating is like, it's subjective, so I mean, you know, take it with a grain of salt. I personally like to rate things just because it helps me to like have a record of, you know, what I felt about a book at a certain time, and just, you know, if I look back on a list, it kind of helps, you know, trigger a memory. Whether my star ratings are helpful for anyone else is kind of by the by, but I feel like if we have similar taste, then it might be helpful. But if not, you can just kind of tune them out, I guess. But yeah, I thought this one was good and I rated it 4 stars. So that was everything I read in March. I feel like it was a bit of a mixed month, but yeah, there were still some really good ones, so that's the main thing. And yeah, it was my birthday month, March, so I'd picked a bunch of books that I was really excited about and thought I was really going to enjoy. So yeah, there were definitely a couple that didn't quite live up to expectations, which is a shame, but yeah, the rest were great, so I'm okay with that. And yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts if you've read any of these, and do let me know what you've been reading recently. If you have any recommendations, I would love to hear about them. I hope you've all had a good March and are currently having a good April. I have been to a couple of library book sales recently, and then also for my birthday I received some books as gifts. So I have, yeah, acquired quite a lot of books already since the last book haul video. So I will try and do another book haul, yeah, maybe in a couple of weeks, we will see. But definitely I have lots of really awesome books to share with you. So I guess you can keep an eye out for that if you're interested. But yeah, I hope you're all doing well, and thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you again in my next video. Bye!